Welcome back to the channel, my fellow Rezolvians. The stock was up about 1% today. Doesn't sound impressive. But hey, look at the other stock that I've recently been buying. Poet Technologies. I think there's a lot of potential in this one. We've made videos about this on the channel. I don't like it as much as Rezolve, but there's a lot of opportunity here. The stock down 7.5% today. Today's a market, or was a market, of really two tails, okay? One side of the markets did okay. The other side did really bad as far as AI, quantum, energy, like rare earths today, down 10%. AI stocks, some data center ones, not good at all. Down anywhere from 2 to, again, 7, 8, 10%. Here you have Rezolve up 1% today. That, to me, looks like a win. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be going over the option activity. We're going to be going over what the short sellers are doing. And recent news. Okay, Rezolve put out a press release yesterday. I don't think the markets love the constant press releases as much as I do. I love to be informed. I love to know exactly what my companies are doing that I'm investing in, okay? So it's fair. Well, Roth MKM actually just came out yesterday with a price target on Rezolve. Not 10% higher, not 20% higher. Check this out. Their price target is 130% higher than where the stock is trading at today. In the last video we made covering Rezolve, I also shared with you that if you look at the stock from a discounted cash flow model, the stock's fair value is about $7.80 per share. Well, if we get back to $7.80 per share from current prices, that's about a 44% rally. So whether you like DCF models, whether you like analyst targets and analyst commentary, I think it's safe to say the stock is significantly undervalued. Now, why do I love that? Well, it's simple. Wall Street is appreciating, overlooking the opportunity in the company. There's a big reason for that, and we'll talk about it in today's episode. When does Wall Street come around to the stock? When does the stock, in my opinion, go from $5.46 per share where it is today to $15 per share, where I think is a semi-reasonable valuation? Still significantly undervalued compared to peers at $15 a share, but that would be better from a valuation perspective than where it is today. When does that actually happen? When am I expecting that to happen? Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot to get into in today's episode. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already, and if you guys want to come discover undiscovered AI, energy, quantum, biopharma, gene editing companies, check that link out down below in the description of this video. Again, I did buy some buying today, and I'll be honest, I bought Poet at about $8 a share. Looked like a crystal ball kind of move. You know, stock starts to rally afterwards. Now it's at $8.50. But there is a clear strategy to winning in this market, and I will also dive into that a little bit in this video as well. So let's go ahead and get started with this price target on Rezolve. So Rezolve AI receives a buy from Roth MKM. In a report released today, Rohit Kulkarni from Roth MKM reiterated a buy rating on Rezolve with a price target of $12.40. The company's shares last closed Friday at $5.13 per share. Kulkarni covers the communication services sector, focusing on stocks such as Pinterest, Alphabet, and Snapchat, according to TipRanks. Kulkarni has an average return of 23.5% and a 63% success rate on recommended stocks. That is impressive, and we'll look at that in just a moment. But Rezolve AI has an analyst consensus of a strong buy with a price target consensus of $9.70, which is 89% upside from current levels. In a report released on October 8th, Northland Securities also maintained a buy rating on the stock with a $7 price target. Rezolve's market cap is currently $1.65 billion. Now, okay, so here's the deal. Right? Rezolve reported earnings on October 1st. They gave a guidance target for next year, 2026, at $500 million. So the company's trading a little bit over, 3 times price to sales. Incredibly cheap. Amazingly cheap. This is the cheapest AI stock on the markets today. By far, there is no comparison. Okay. Now, this analyst is a 5-star rated analyst. He is actually rated 246 out of 10,081 Wall Street analysis. Okay. Analyst. He's ranked 671 out of 42,279 experts. If you were to grade this guy, he would have an A+. Okay? So, probably the best analyst currently covering the stock from a, success rating perspective, okay? Average return, 23.5%. From an analyst perspective, here, he's killing it. More than double the S&P. Success rate of 63%. Again, that is very much on the high side of Wall Street, quote-unquote, experts. This user on X, Ethel Dora, says Rezolve pre-market valuation is completely undervalued. Rezolve closed at $5.46. Yet AI SaaS peers trade 3 to 5x higher on a multiple basis. Fair value above $8 per share. And I think a lot of people are starting to, at least over on X, from what I could tell, catch on to the significant undervaluation that the markets are assigning Rezolve. Now, the big problem with Rezolve is there's not a lot of exposure on the company. There's not a lot of coverage on the company. It doesn't get talked about on CNBC. Yes, as partnerships with Google, Microsoft, and Tether, but that happened long before anyone cared about these partnerships, right? Like, if those partnerships were announced today, the stock would go up significantly on that news. Well, you already have the partnerships, and, it's not new news, okay? So what really takes Rezolve from significant undervaluation to a fair value, which I think is around $15 a share based on similar kind of company valuations in the AI software space, okay? Around $15 per share. When does that actually happen? How does that happen? Well, NVIDIA takes a stake. That could happen. A big investor buys into the company. Maybe we just go through a round of euphoria for AI stocks, which is probably the most likely. But it could be a combination of any of these things, okay? Citadel bought a $100 million stake at $6.67 per share. I think they are incentivized to have their investment do well. Maybe get some buddy friends, some fellow partners invested in the company. Again, I'm theorizing here, but you need something to put this stock into the spotlight. People don't know about this company. That's why it is $5.50 and not $15.50 per share, like it should be, okay? Now, I do believe over the next 3 months, the stock will start to get the coverage that it deserves. I do think people will start to catch on to the company. If they don't, if the stock falls any further, if we have geopolitical trade war problems that emerge and get worse, that is just a larger and larger opportunity, in my opinion. Now, there's been some people that have asked the question of, is dilution coming? I don't think so. The company has about $220 million of cash on their balance sheet. Okay, plenty of cash to sustain the business into 2027. Okay, unless they plan to do some huge acquisitions, buy a bunch of companies, I don't see more dilution coming. I think the company probably realizes they can't dilute anymore from this point forward, at least for a long time. Something else I really love about Rezolve is the insider ownership. Okay, insiders own about 38% of shares. The number's probably a little bit lower today, maybe 35%, maybe even 30%. Okay, dilution takes away ownership from everyone. Okay, so call it 30%. Retail investors own about 40%. Maybe half of those are long hold investors, like early adopters of the company, like myself, that have no plans in selling. That's around 50% of shares that are, for the most part, just being bought and held. Now, institutions have really just started buying the company, so I don't think there's a lot of, institutions at this point that are selling. Okay, if they're buying, they're probably holding this thing. They see the significant undervaluation alongside us. Okay. So there is a substantial amount of the float that is bought and held. And that is why the stock can be so volatile on low volume days even, okay? Like on October 13th, the stock went up 6.5% on 14.7 million in volume. If you break this out in a dollar denominated basis, it's like virtually nothing, okay? What did we say, October 13th? Crap, we got to move that over. The 13th, 14.7 million shares for volume times high of the day $5.47, low of the day $5.12. Let's use a conservative estimate. Let's do $5.30. That is $78 million worth of volume. That is literally nothing. I want to see what Poets is, just because that's a stock that I've recently been buying. So Rezolve, 78 million. Great. In dollar volume, okay? Now, let's look at Poet. Let's look at yesterday, okay? Pretty average volume day. 20.2 million for volume, okay? And I'm just picking on Poet here again. High of the day, $9.40. Low of the day, $7.89. That was a huge swing. Let's use an average of $8.50, okay? Times $8.50 gives you $172 million for volume. 3 times the dollar amount that was traded in Rezolve. Okay? That's what we're talking about here. Poet's not like a well-known stock by Wall Street by any means. If you look at BBAI for an example, right? Volume here in BBAI, 212 million. With, let's call it an average price around $8.30, super conservative here. That is $1.75 billion worth of dollars traded in the stock. Hello? Rezolve's at 78 million. When you see some real money start to go into Rezolve, the upside will be explosive. Like, dramatically more than you expect. The stock could double in a day on 200 million in volume and still be a undiscovered stock, if you will. I'm making the bet here that dollar volume will increase, that people will become more familiar with the company. And when you actually put the numbers to it, it is dramatic how different Rezolve's dollar denominated volume looks like versus some of the other well-known AI stocks. So that just gives you a little bit of perspective on how undiscovered the stock is. I don't know about you guys, but I've made the most money in stocks that are undiscovered that become discovered, right? That's where you're going to get that 5x, that 10x, that 20, 30x. It's typically not in the Starbuckses or the, some of those kind of companies that everyone knows about. Now, in option activity yesterday, there was some bearish order flows, at least on Ortex. Ortex said there was, but I actually had some members in the trading community look at different software, and it was actually very bullish. So these $14 puts were actually sold. I don't know why it comes up as negative option activity, but it's basically saying the stock will stay above, it was like $6.70. We'll get above that by January. So these trades were actually very bullish yesterday, which, sometimes you got to double check Ortex, I guess. Now, short interest of free flow, also really tame for this company for being such a small stock that not a lot of people know about. It's not getting attacked by short sellers, which is a good sign, right? Normally on your higher, risk stocks, well, the short interest is going to be a lot higher. On Rezolve, it's only 9.67%, which is relatively low for a company that doesn't have a lot of market exposure like Rezolve. You do have 15 million shares that are sold short and about 3 million shares today that are being sold short. So there is a selling pressure on Rezolve. And I think some of the selling pressure recently, I really can't overstate this enough. I think it has to do with Rezolve has high volatility, right? It has a high beta. If markets come down, Rezolve is going to come down a lot more. And I think that's why you're seeing an increase in daily shorting activity. And then it seems to be pretty fast covering, right? They're going to go short, they're going to cover the next day. They're going to go short, they're going to cover the next day. Because of this China volatility, some of these high-flying AI stocks are a great way to hedge because the volatility is so high. Again, that if things settle down and get good again between China, it's a really risky strategy because these are going to be the stocks that go up the most. So it's a high risk, high reward game that hedge funds and institutions are playing right now. And from a technical perspective, it looks like the stock is really finding a lot of demand and a lot of support, if you will, just above the $5 level. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days of seeing some solid demand and support between really $5.30 and as low as, $5 a share. It seems to be an area where a lot of buyers are stepping in. If we fall back into the fours, that's where I will be buying the stock more. When the stock fell on, I think algorithms being confused the other day, it fell like 20% in after hours after the China news. I jumped at that opportunity to buy the stock in the fours. If we do get a large decline in markets from the China crap, I will be buying a bunch more in Rezolve. Now, I do think the odds favor things getting better between the US and China, and I guess time will only tell. And when it comes to Rezolve specifically, it's obviously going to benefit from those tensions dying down when that happens. But I do think Rezolve, what investors really want at this point, what could get the stock really moving, is a partnership, of course, but another large contract. If Rezolve actually comes out with a press release on a large customer, that would be significant news. Everything else is in play. Heavy insider ownership, not a lot of people know about the company, AI software, huge margins, massive guidance for next year, and this undervaluation. You really just need a catalyst at this point for this thing to double or triple. Okay? And from a risk reward perspective, you're buying this company at a little bit over 3 times sales. I don't know how much farther or further the stock can decline from here unless we get like some serious weakness in the broader market. It's so cheap, it's stupid. Okay? So yeah, it's 3 times cheaper today than when I bought the stock at $3, $2 a share, right? Just because they raised guidance so much. The stock is 3 times cheaper than when I bought the stock. In this portfolio, I have 14,000 shares, current market value $76,440. Average cost $2.96, currently up $35,000 or about 84.2%. I still do own these 15 options here, these Rezolve 250 calls for February 20th, 2026. Total return $3,000 or 191%. They're currently trading for about $305 a piece. In this portfolio, I have 13,000 shares, current market value $71,000, currently up $30,627 or about 76%. Again, I have 1,000 shares in Webull, 1,300 shares in Thinkorswim that, again, I haven't done anything with, plus the 13,000 shares here, plus the 1,500 shares worth of equivalent shares via the options, plus 14,000 shares in the Robinhood portfolio brings the total to 30,800 shares. Times that by $5.46, where the stock is currently trading at. I have net total exposure in Rezolve at $168,168. This is going to be either a 6-figure loss or a multi-million-dollar position over the next 12 months, in my opinion. There's no other way around it. It's either going to be really successful or really bad if it's like a fraud or something, which seems unlikely considering you're going to go to prison. Okay, not a lot of corporate executives want to go to prison. Last I checked, it's not the place for them. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for today's episode. Let me know your position down below in the comment section. When do you expect Rezolve to start working again? Not to say it hasn't. You're still up a lot in the last couple of months, blah, blah, blah. But when do you think Rezolve is going to take that next leg higher? And what do you think about the volume analysis and just the shocking difference between Rezolve and other stocks? So let me know your thoughts on all of this down below in the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to do one last thing. Just one last thing, if you'll bear with me. This was the highest volume day Rezolve has ever had, okay? 94.2 million in volume, okay? 94,200,000, okay? With a closing price of $5.06, a low of the day of $4.94, and a high of the day of $6.23. Let's go with like $5.50, almost right in the middle. That means Rezolve's best volume day ever was $518 million traded in the company. That is 3 times less than BBAI just did the other day. Yeah, kind of wild. So let me know your thoughts on this, again, down below in the comment section. Come join the trading community if you would like to. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.